You've probably heard at some point that you should give yourself grace or that you should be your own best friend. And yet, the steps to do this can sometimes feel pretty vague or unclear. At least that's how I felt when I was first beginning my journey of, self-kindness and self-love. And fortunately, as I became a therapist, which I've been for the last over 15 years now, I learned that there is a system to learning how to like yourself. It doesn't have to be so unclear. And in this system, in this process, there are practical steps that we can implement to become our own best friend. And I really love that it can be a roadmap to self-love, to self-liking, to self-grace with this simple skill that I have learned and implement it into my own life. And truthfully, I first learned about this skill, this process, when I was first working as a therapist. During my first year as a therapist, I learned about this skill, and it might as well have been a foreign language to me. It just did not make any sense. And I had to digest this concept for a very long time because the way I showed up in my own relationship with myself was really toxic. I was very hard on myself. I was really self-neglecting. And it really came from this place of I genuinely didn't like myself. I genuinely hated myself. And so my relationship with myself was naturally toxic. But as I digested this concept, my life started to change. And as I taught clients this skill, they really went from this idea of being able to understand that they should, love themselves or like themselves, to actually feeling that way in their own life. And this process is incredibly simple to understand once you kind of hear it laid out. And so I really want to invite you to consider how the practice of self-compassion can lead you to truly feeling like your own best friend. And self-compassion, maybe you've heard about it, it's this idea of giving yourself grace. It actually has 3 tenets to it. So Kristen Neff, in her book, Self-Compassion, talks about the 3 tenets of self-compassion. And the first step for self-compassion, to learn how to be your own best friend, is self-kindness. You want to learn how to be kind to yourself, and there's some steps to that, which I'll get into in just a moment. And then the second tenet of self-compassion, of learning how to be your own best friend, learning how to be kind to yourself, is going to be mindfulness, which is just attention to the present moment without judging it. We'll go into that a little bit more in a moment. And then an idea called common humanity. And for me, I was like, wow, that is so vague. What does that even mean? But fundamentally, common humanity, this tenet of self-compassion, means we learn to accept, or we practice accepting, that as a human being, there are unavoidable experiences. As a human being, you're going to experience a whole range of emotions, both comfortable and uncomfortable. As a human being, you're going to experience wins, but you also will experience losses, and none of this is personal. So let's dive into unpacking these 3 steps of self-compassion so that you can practice the process of being your own best friend rather than it seeming unclear or kind of piecemeal in your own life. And so the first process of self-compassion is self-kindness. This is where we learn how to treat ourselves with respect. It's that idea of talk to yourself like you're a friend to yourself. Because a lot of us are much harsher towards ourselves than we would ever be to someone, at least aloud. And so we need to practice giving ourselves the same sort of respect that we would give others. And learning how to speak to ourselves kindly is absolutely a practice. And I would say, really, try not to worry too much if you do catch yourself being critical with yourself, being hard on yourself. Rather, instead, you want to practice interrupting those thoughts. That's why mindfulness is so important. When you're mindful, you learn to notice what's going on a lot more readily. And so instead of, beating yourself up all day, it might be 10 minutes and you'll be like, oh wait, I'm being way too hard on myself. Let's interrupt it. That's really the goal here is you want to interrupt when you're being unkind to yourself rather than trying to do this perfectly. And that kind of relates to this third tenet as well of common humanity, because we're imperfect as human beings. That is an unavoidable truth of being human. No matter how much some of us try or, try to present that we're perfect, we're just imperfect. And so you might still have this inner critic, no problem. Instead, you want to interrupt it when you hear yourself being hard on yourself. And then you want to practice giving yourself the same respect you would give other people. And to go a little bit deeper, I would encourage you to be really understanding with yourself. Because to be your own best friend, to be kind to yourself, to give yourself grace, you have to develop, if you don't already have it, a sense of a secure attachment within you. And secure attachment means it's a safe, healthy relationship where we can show up and be accepted for who we are. Like, we don't have to perform and we don't have to obviously be perfect. And so we want to develop this safe, secure relationship with ourselves. And part of this process means we truly look to see ourselves and to give ourselves understanding. And I love the skill of self-validation for this. So when we're self-validating, we're self-kind. We're kind to ourselves when we give ourselves understanding. And that's all that self-validation is. It's that whatever you feel, whatever you think, whatever you're going through, it all makes sense. It all makes sense in context. For example, if you feel jealous of a friend who's accomplishing, things in their life that you would love to accomplish in yours, that makes sense. That's natural. And I just validated why that makes sense. You would like to accomplish those things too. And maybe even going deeper, maybe you feel like accomplishing those things for whatever reason is not possible for you or harder for you. And so that makes sense that you would feel jealous. And so when we're giving ourselves this act of kindness, we give ourselves understanding. For example, we would say to ourselves, it's okay that you feel jealous. It's okay that you feel jealous of your friend. I know that it's really uncomfortable. I know you learned that you should never feel jealous or that it's ugly or petty. But jealousy is a human emotion and it's okay. I allow you to feel jealous and it's okay. I know how uncomfortable it is. So I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong to feel jealous, but instead, why don't we do something nice tonight for ourselves? Why don't we get, our favorite little treat and watch a cozy movie, and I'm just going to show up for you because I know how uncomfortable jealousy is. We learn to talk to ourselves that way. And you might be listening to this and you might think, oh, that's kind of corny or cheesy, or you might think that sounds really hard to do. And I'll validate that. Absolutely. It is a practice, and that's why you just want to work on it. And every time you catch yourself being hard on yourself, it's an opportunity to interrupt it and speak to yourself with kindness and respect. Give yourself understanding as to why it makes sense that you are coming from where you're coming from. And sometimes we don't always know why we feel this way. I feel like that's a big part of therapy initially with clients that I've worked with, is I'm working on helping them validate themselves. I'm working on helping them connect the dots so they can do that process for themselves. So initially I'll validate for them. I'll go well, it makes sense that you're, stuffing your anger. You learned in your family that you should only, speak about positive things, that they didn't want to hear anything that was uncomfortable or inconvenient. So of course you stuff your anger. You learn that people don't have space for it. That makes sense. So initially you might be working with someone who helps you learn how to validate. But fundamentally just kind of these affirmations that summarize this idea of being safe for yourself with this act of kindness is kind of you could say to yourself, I see you, I accept you, and you belong with me no matter what. You might even want to practice saying that. Maybe you don't know how to validate it yet. Maybe you don't know why you feel a certain way, but you can still say, I see you, I accept you, or I'm working on accepting you. I'm a big believer in bridge affirmations. If we don't believe something, just say I'm working to see you, I'm working to accept you, because that's true. If you're saying it, that's true. You are practicing that. And it's I'm learning that you belong with me no matter what. I'm learning that I don't have to abandon myself. And self-criticism self-criticism and being hard on ourselves is a form of self-abandonment. And by the way, I've worked with lots of people, and I used to feel this way too, where there was this idea that if you're kind to yourself, you're just going to stagnate. If you're kind to yourself, you're never going to accomplish anything. But the really cool thing, and we can actually feel this truth, but it's proven by research, is people who are self-compassionate are more likely to achieve their goals. Because, I don't know if you've ever been hard on yourself, for example, if we're trying to make changes in a relationship, but then you end up, saying the wrong thing, and the conversation goes sour. If you're, beating yourself up, you're so whatever, we know all the negative words that we could say to ourselves. I'm not gonna repeat them, but if you're being hard on yourself and you're beating yourself up, you're going to naturally be less likely to stick with it, to learn the skills to slow down and show up in your relationships in a healthier way, versus, someone who's kind to themselves. What? Change is really hard. It's okay, you made a mistake. No problem. Let's go journal. Let's go figure out what was underneath that. And let's, try again. We're going to go on a walk. You did not drink enough water today. And so we're going to interrupt that. I think that you were just really feeling dehydrated and irritable. And so we're going to make sure that we don't do that. That's what a kind, compassionate person would do with themselves rather than beating themselves up. So you're going to be more likely to achieve your goals if you can talk to yourself that way. And again, it's a practice. Please don't worry about, doing this perfectly. Every single time you interrupt an unkind thought and you go no, I deserve kindness right now. I deserve some compassion right now. Awesome. You are building that friendship with yourself. And we don't become best friends with someone the day we meet them. You're building that friendship. And then the second tenet of self-compassion is going to be mindfulness. And mindfulness, it's a word that gets thrown out a lot, but it's, kind of simple to understand, not always simple to practice as human beings. That's part of the human condition. But mindfulness is simply the practice of putting our full attention on the present moment without judging it. So you literally could just be present right now by taking a breath and going, and if you're focusing on this and you're not doing anything else while you're listening to this video and you're really kind of thinking about how to implement it, you're being mindful. That's it, but, when we're mindful, nothing's good or bad, right or wrong. And again, this is not easy for us as human beings. Our primal brain is designed to judge things so that we can stay safe, safe, unsafe, good, bad, that helps us stay safe. But, kind of in our current modern society, that practice kind of can hinder us sometimes. That default setting rather can hinder us. So instead of things being good or bad, we work on just noticing reality for what that is. So for example, you could notice I feel really hot and angry by what he just said, versus he's so wrong, he's to blame, I have to show him that I'm right. No, I noticed that I'm hot and angry by what he just said. And then we would kind of take a breath. That's mindfulness. And think about that gives us so many more options for how we're going to respond to our relationships and ourselves if we can kind of notice in the moment when things like that happen. And research shows that people who are self-compassionate are actually perceived as better partners with others, because naturally we're able to be kinder to others and give them more understanding when we can give that to ourselves. And so when we're mindful, everything that comes up for us is simply information. I notice I'm hot. I notice I'm angry. I noticed that my stomach, dropped by what they said. And this is a practice. And so we practice being mindful kind of moment to moment, when we're not upset, so that it becomes easier when we are kind of, dysregulated. And that can be as simple as having a practice where you take 3 deep breaths before bedtime. You check in with your body when you wake up and you just kind of go, okay, how are you doing this morning? And you just kind of notice, oh, okay, maybe my shoulder's off. I just need to give myself a few rolls. Literally just taking 30 seconds to do that is an act of mindfulness, and the more we practice it, the more we're able to kind of notice in the moment when we're being unkind to ourselves and interrupt it. So these two things obviously kind of play a role together. Like, I can't really hear my inner critic if I'm not mindful. And so I practice mindfulness, and there's lots of ways: taking deep breaths, taking a nature walk without distractions, eating without distractions, coloring, there's so many different ways, meditation, yoga when you're truly kind of connected to your body and breath. But it can be as simple as a breath, noticing what's around you. Like, I love saying things like, list 5 things you see in the room that are red. Like, when you're doing that, you're not paying attention to anything else. And so you're naturally mindful. So that's the other part of practicing to become your own best friend and building that relationship. And then finally is that concept that was pretty vague to me at first, which is common humanity. Common humanity most basically means that we work on practicing accepting that as a human being, we are imperfect. And yet we're inherently valuable. No matter what society teaches, and like our society, I'm in the United States, teaches that there are people who are better and people who are worse. And it can be for a whole range of things, income, looks, education, whatever. But in our common humanity, the truth is that all human beings are equal. No human being was born with less or more value. So we are inherently valuable, even though we're imperfect. And so when we accept this truth, we don't get too caught up in our flaws. Yes, there might be things that we want to grow, to change, to improve upon, but we don't get stuck on the idea of like how bad or broken or wrong we are. Instead, we might go, I'd love to learn more about this subject. I'm going to just, maybe I'm going to go back to school because I've discovered this is my passion. We're not going to beat ourselves up when we're accepting this. Like, for example, like maybe the time we lost or, the deficits we have in our understanding around this. We're just going to be like, hey, I can grow this. Like, yeah, like, and in common humanity, we accept that as a human being, again, we're going to experience a whole range of emotions. Like, even though some of us have been taught, a lot of us have been taught that there are bad emotions. That's not true when we're mindful, remember? Nothing's good or bad when we're mindful. But rather, there are emotions that are comfortable and emotions that are uncomfortable. And this can differ for a lot of people. I mean, I've worked with people, it is totally natural, if depending on different life experiences, that joy can feel uncomfortable. So we just kind of go, oh, I can notice if it's uncomfortable or comfortable. But as a human being, we're going to experience joy and suffering just because we're alive. Like, simply because we're alive, we're going to experience wins and celebrations and accomplishments and, really awesome experiences. But also because we're alive, we're going to experience loss, rejection, disappointment. Like, that's just a part of being human. And the only way that we can try to reduce our sense of suffering in our lives, like to never be rejected, is to just never put ourselves out there. And that's not really living. Being truly alive is vulnerable. Like, it's, we have to learn how to put ourselves out there. And when we're self-compassionate, we can do that with a lot more grace, because like we notice that all of us take time to learn something. All of us, for example, like if you want to make YouTube videos, like you're not going to be as good your first video as you will be on your 30th video. That's just what it means to be human. And when we celebrate our common humanity, it's like self-compassion. We're like, okay, let's lean in. Like, I gotta grow. I gotta start somewhere. And, having strengths and having, things that we need to learn or grow or flaws, they don't define our worth and value, because all of us are equally worthy. And so just because we're alive, we're going to experience good things. Happy things, joyful things, and uncomfortable or painful things. And when we're self-compassionate, we really go like, for example, like, I know how badly it hurts that you didn't get that job. Self-kindness. I can feel your pain. Mindful. And only one person was going to get that job. And missing out on job opportunities is a part of what it means to be alive. Like, you did such a good job putting yourself out there. I know that really pushed you to apply for that job, and you got some really good feedback about the things you can grow upon, and like, okay, you weren't the right candidate for this role at this company at this time, but that's okay. That happens to all of us. Maybe you don't always hear people talk about it, but it happens to all of us. And so let's take a breath. Let's do something kind for ourselves, and we'll start again, next week on our job search. Like, that's kind of the whole, like, all 3 steps of mindfulness, self-kindness, common humanity put into like one, like example. And, as you're watching this, I would love to know what concept is resonating with you, what stands out to you. Maybe you're already really good at one of these practices, accepting our common humanity, mindfulness, self-kindness. I would love to hear, where you're like feeling really strong in your relationship with yourself, or maybe even those concerns. Like, I love connecting with you and supporting you. Like, if you leave a comment, like, I'm going to reply. Like, I love connecting with you. So please, feel free to share. And if these ideas really resonate with you, but you're still feeling a little uncertain about how to like implement them into your own life, like you're understanding the examples, but you're like, yeah, but I don't know how to practice it. Like, for example, like, I don't know how to validate myself. Like, I don't make sense to myself. Then, I invite you, if you feel called to it, to get more support with myself and in a community. And in the description, you will see that invitation to have more direct support around implementing these concepts. But either way, I know that you're completely capable of this. Like, and to me, my own transformation from self-hatred to self-love, which was centered around these concepts, is so proof positive that it works. But there's a lot of research around self-compassion, and I've seen the changes in so many clients' lives as well when they really chose to practice mindfulness, self-kindness, and accepting that as human beings we're imperfect and valuable, and we're all going to go through certain life experiences. I have loved connecting with you today. Again, please feel free to share what you feel called to about your, like areas of like challenges or areas of like, accomplishment. I'm here for you. And I cannot wait to connect with you in the next video.